My name is Carol Foster. I'm 65 years old. And if you told me 6 months ago that I'd be rebuilding my life from scratch, I would have laughed. My days were quiet. Predictable. Stitched together with coffee cups and Sunday calls. I thought I was safe. I thought I'd paid my dues. But one night turned everything I knew into smoke and silence. I remember standing barefoot on the sidewalk, watching orange light flicker through what used to be my kitchen window. My entire world, 40 years of memories burned in, under an hour. The photo albums, the smell of cinnamon at Christmas, the creaky floorboard that always made me smile when I walked across it barefoot. All gone. And yet, what hurt more than watching that house burn was what came after. It wasn't just the fire that destroyed everything. It was the moment I reached out to the one person I thought would never let me fall and realized I was wrong. People always say your children will be there for you, that when push comes to shove, family shows up. But standing there with nothing but a half-melted purse and a single change of clothes, I learned that's not always true. Sometimes the real fire comes later, the kind that doesn't light up the sky, but burns quietly inside your chest. I didn't know it yet. But this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. And the worst part, the betrayal hadn't even happened yet. Before the fire, my days moved with the kind of rhythm that feels invisible until it's gone. I used to wake up just before sunrise. When the light slipped through the lace curtains and painted gold on the kitchen wall, my husband, Richard, had been gone for 10 years. But I still used his old mug every morning, the one with the chip on the rim he refused to throw away. Somehow, coffee just didn't taste right in anything else. I liked my kit life. The garden out back. My little porch swing. The sound of cicadas when the air turned heavy at dusk. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Safe. I'd spent most of my life building that safety after losing Richard. After raising my son alone. After every bill was paid, one careful check at a time. That old house was more than wood and paint. It was proof that I had made it through. Every room had a story. The hallway still held faint scuff marks from when my son, Nathan, used to race his toy cars across the floor. The pantry door had pencil lines where I measured his height year after year, watching him stretch toward the man he'd become. Even after he moved out, I never painted over them. I guess I liked seeing the trail of his growing up. It reminded me that love leaves marks you don't always see until you look back. Sometimes I'd catch myself talking to Richard's photograph on the mantel. Just small things about the neighbor's cat sneaking into the flower beds, or how the tomatoes were late that summer. It sounds silly, but it made the house feel alive again. Like love was still echoing between the walls. Looking back, I realize how often I took that peace for granted. I thought that kind of comfort was permanent. That I could grow old surrounded by everything I'd built. Everything I'd loved. But the thing about life is it never warns you before it changes. One moment you're sipping coffee, watching sunlight spill across the table. The next, you're standing barefoot on cold asphalt, watching everything you've ever known turn to ash. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet life, the one I thought would last forever, was already over. And by the time I understood that, it was far too late to go back. It started with the smallest thing, just a strange smell, like something sharp and wrong in the air. I remember wrinkling my nose, thinking maybe I'd left the iron on again. The sun was coming in warm through the curtains, casting soft patterns across the living room rug. Nothing felt dangerous. Nothing warned me that everything was about to change. But then I saw it just behind the drapes. A shimmer. A flicker of orange. Like the world was holding its breath. And the moment I pulled the curtain back, heat rushed at me like an open oven door. I stood there frozen, heart hammering, eyes locked on the flames, already crawling up the wallpaper. The smoke alarm didn't go off. I'd meant to change the battery months ago. But I forgot. It seemed like such a small thing at the time. Funny how it's the small things that tear your whole life apart. The smoke turned thick and black within seconds. I dropped my phone trying to call for help. It slid across the tile and disappeared in the gray. I couldn't breathe. My throat burned. The kitchen window shattered behind me, and the fire roared louder. Greedy for air. I don't remember unlocking the back door. I just remember the cold slap of evening air on my face as I stumbled outside. My slippers were gone. My legs were shaking. Behind me, flames poured out of the house, devouring curtains, picture frames, birthday cards, everything. Neighbors rushed over. Voices urgent but far away. Someone wrapped a blanket around me. I didn't even realize I was shaking. My eyes just stayed locked on the place that used to be my home. And when the fire chief walked up, all I could hear him say over the crackling wood, over the wind, over the chaos, was two words: total loss. That phrase echoed inside me like an empty hallway. Not just about the house, but about everything that lived in it. Richard's armchair, the smell of vanilla from my old recipe box, Nathan's kindergarten photo on the mantel, gone. By sunrise, the fire was out. All that remained were beams, ash, and the strange, metallic smell of a life erased. But I still didn't cry. Not yet. I think part of me was still hoping someone would say this was a mistake. That somehow, I could walk back through the front door like nothing had happened. Instead, I stood there quietly, waiting for the next blow. And it was coming. I just didn't know it yet. By the second morning, the shock began to fade, and exhaustion took its place. I had barely slept. The borrowed blanket from a neighbor still smelled of smoke, and the air carried that faint metallic scent that seemed to cling to everything I owned or what was left of it. My phone had melted in the fire, so I borrowed Mrs. Caldwell's landline. I hesitated with my finger over the buttons for a long time. There was only one person I could call. When Nathan picked up, I almost broke down just hearing his voice. For a moment, I believed things would be okay. I told him about the fire, about how the house was gone. I said I didn't want much, just a place to stay until the insurance came through. I could hear the pause on the other end, that tiny gap of silence that tells you something's about to hurt. He finally said I could come over. And for that brief moment, relief washed over me like rain after a long drought. I still remember sitting in that cab, driving through his perfect neighborhood. Everything was neat, trimmed, in order, the kind of place that smelled like new paint and lawn fertilizer. When we pulled up to Nathan's house, I sat in the car for a minute, studying myself. I thought of all those years I'd spent helping him through school, through heartbreak, through life. I thought of the boy who used to run into my arms. That memory was enough to push me out of the car. Nathan greeted me at the door, smiling but nervous. I could feel the stiffness in his hug. Behind him stood Heather, his wife, polished and composed. The kind of woman who always looked camera-ready, even in her own kitchen. I tried to tell myself I was imagining the way her eyes flicked toward my suitcase. They showed me in. The house was spotless white couches, glass tables. Not a single thing out of place. I perched on the edge of a chair like a guest in someone else's life. I tried to explain that I'd only need a few weeks, just long enough to get back on my feet. But the air in that room shifted. Heavy and careful. Heather spoke first. Her voice sweet but sharp at the edges. She said they were still adjusting, that they needed their space. Nathan cleared his throat and added that maybe a short stay in one of those extended stay motels would be better. He said he could help with a few $100s. A few hundred. That was the moment my heart sank, not because of the money, but because of what it meant. I wasn't his mother standing there anymore. I was a burden, an inconvenience, someone to manage and move along quietly. I remember sitting there, clutching my purse, forcing my voice to stay steady. I told them I wouldn't be in the way, that I could cook, clean, help around the house. But Heather just smiled, that polite smile that doesn't reach the eyes. And Nathan looked down at the floor. That silence said more than words ever could. So I stood up. I told them I understood. I thanked them for their time, as if I'd just been turned down for a job. And when I walked out that front door, I felt the ground tilt beneath me. That night, I checked into a budget motel off the highway. The kind with buzzing neon signs and thin walls that let you hear strangers argue through the vents. The room smelled faintly of bleach and cigarettes. I washed my only outfit in the sink and hung it to dry on the shower rod. I lay there staring at the ceiling. The sound of cars passing outside. My son had shut his door. And the only thing louder than the quiet was the realization that I had nowhere left to go. But even then, somewhere in that emptiness, I felt something stirring, a faint, stubborn spark that refused to die. And that spark was about to lead me somewhere I never expected, to someone I'd almost forgotten existed. By the third night in that motel room, the walls started to close in. The hum of the air conditioner was uneven, coughing like an old man with a bad habit. I'd stretched the little money I had as far as it could go. The motel clerk had already hinted that my room was booked for the weekend. Noon checkout, no extensions. I sat at the little round table by the window, light from the street lamp flickering through the blinds. In front of me, just sitting there, was something I hadn't looked at in years. An old business card. The edges were soft, yellowed. The ink had faded so much, it was barely legible. But I didn't need to read it. I knew every inch of that card by heart. On the back, in my own handwriting, I'd written 2 words long ago, "Don't forget," and I never really had. His name was Thomas Bennett. My first love. The kind of love that comes before you learn how the world really works. We met in Savannah. Years before Richard. Before marriage and motherhood and mortgages. Tom was wild-hearted. A little reckless. But he had this way of looking at me like I was something rare. We were supposed to build a life together once. But life got in the way. Or maybe fear did. He left for the army. I stayed for family. We promised we'd find each other again. We didn't. Still, I kept that card. Through all the moves. Through losing Richard. Through raising Nathan. I carried it, tucked into the back of my wallet like a secret I wasn't ready to let go of. And now, with everything burned and broken, that card felt like the only thing left that belonged to me. I stared at the number for a long time. I had no idea if it even still worked. Maybe he'd moved. Changed his life. Forgotten me entirely. But I dialed. The line rang once. Twice. Then a voice. Older but unmistakable. In that moment, all the years between us disappeared. My voice cracked as I told him what had happened. That I had nowhere else to go. That I didn't even know why I was calling. Except that I needed something familiar. Something that felt like home. Even if it was just for a moment. He didn't hesitate it. He asked where I was. Told me not to move. Said he was coming. No questions. No conditions. Just, I'm on my way. And an hour later, his car pulled into the parking lot. When I saw him step out, gray at the temples, lines deeper around his eyes. But still him, I felt something inside me loosen. Like the tight knot of fear had finally started to unravel. He opened the door like it was nothing. Told me gently to get in. He didn't rush. He didn't pry. Just placed his hand lightly over mine on the center console. We drove in silence for a while. Past the edge of town. Past all the burned edges of my life. The roads were dark, but I didn't feel lost anymore. That night, I wasn't just leaving a motel. I was leaving the ruins of what was, and heading towards something I hadn't dared believe I might still deserve. A second chance. Not just at shelter, but at something far deeper. Something I thought had burned up with everything else. But some embers never die. They wait. Tom's house sat at the edge of a quiet inlet, nestled between old oaks, draped in Spanish moss. It wasn't fancy, but it had a kind of gracewood, stone, and glass all fitting together like it had grown from the land itself. The moment I stepped inside, the smell of cedar and lemon oil welcomed me, and somehow, without even trying, it felt more like home than anywhere I'd been in years. He gave me the guest room, bright, airy, with soft curtains that moved when the breeze passed through the open window. I kept my suitcase closed for days, afraid that if I unpacked, it would all disappear. Like comfort was something temporary, something I didn't deserve to hold on to for too long. But Tom never made me feel like a guest. Not once. Every morning, there was coffee waiting by the window cream. No sugar. Just like I'd always taken it. I didn't even know he remembered that. We'd sit on the back porch in quiet, watching the marsh shimmer gold in the early light. I hadn't hummed in years. But I caught myself doing it one morning as I poured my second cup. That's when I knew. Something inside me had begun to soften. I cooked one evening. Chicken and dumplings. The way my grandmother used to make them. Tom took one bite and smiled, like he'd found something he didn't know he'd been missing. That look stayed with me. He had this greenhouse behind the house, filled with orchids. Dozens of them, all carefully labeled and cared for. When I asked why he'd kept them all these years, his answer was quiet. He'd been waiting for someone to share them with. And just like that, the grief began to lift. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Because in that stillness, in those simple routines, coffee, soup, walking the garden, I felt seen again. Not as someone who had lost everything, but as someone who still had something to give. For the first time since the fire, I wasn't surviving. I was living. And even more than that, I was being loved. Not out of obligation. Not out of guilt, but with intention. It was slow, real, and gentle. Exactly what I hadn't known I needed. And just as I started to believe this new life might truly be mine, my phone rang. And the name on the screen, Nathan. When I saw Nathan's name light up my screen, I froze. My heart did this strange flutter, not fear. Not hope, just uncertainty. I hadn't heard from him since that day on his doorstep. A part of me wanted to let it ring. Let it go to voicemail. But another part, the mother part, still wanted to believe maybe something had changed. His voice was careful. Almost rehearsed. He said he was worried. Said I'd disappeared, and that he didn't know where I'd gone. I told him I was staying with an old friend. I kept it simple. But the moment I mentioned Tom's name, the tone changed. That edge came back into his voice. He questioned everything: who Tom was, what I was doing, why I hadn't come back to him and Heather. It hurt. Even then, that he could turn concern into control so quickly. That he still couldn't hear what I needed beneath my words. He said they'd talked. That maybe they had overreacted. He offered the guest room again. Said I could come back until I figured things out. Years ago, that offer would have brought me to tears. I would have packed instantly, grateful for even that sliver of grace. But not this time. Because now, I had something more than shelter. I had peace. And respect. So I told him kindly but firmly that I already had a place where I felt like family. And when he started to push back, I didn't flinch. I chose myself. And for the first time in a long time, that choice felt like freedom. Real freedom. And I wasn't letting go of it. Autumn crept in like an old friend, quiet, familiar, and full of golden light. The marsh behind Tom's house turned the color of rust and honey, and every morning felt like waking up inside a painting. We had slipped into a rhythm that didn't need explanation. He'd make the coffee. I'd toast the bread. We spoke less with words, more with the soft touches and gentle glances that people earn after surviving life's storms. One evening, as the sun spilled over the porch railing. He turned to me. There was no big speech. No trembling hands. Just calm certainty. And then he said it, that we should stop pretending this was temporary. He asked me to marry him. At first, I thought he was joking. I even laughed. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw the truth of it clear and steady. He wasn't asking out of pity. He wasn't trying to rescue me. He was simply offering love. Again. As he once had when we were young. Only this time, I was finally ready to receive it. We married quietly. Under the old live oak in his backyard. No crowd. No fanfare. Just a few people who mattered. And vows spoken, not with nervous excitement, but with deep, weathered faith. Nathan came. He stood quietly in the back. Eyes glassy but open. I saw him smile when Tom kissed my cheek. And that moment, just that one glance felt like something healing. Not all at once. But maybe the beginning of it? We had lemon cake and paper plates and laughter that rolled out under the trees like music. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And for me, at 65, real was more than enough. It was everything. Life after the wedding wasn't some grand fairy tale. There were still bills to pay. Dishes to wash. Mornings when my back ached more than I'd admit. But it felt different now. Grounded. Honest. Like all the noise had fallen away. And what was left was just the good stuff. Soft conversations over coffee. Sunlight on the water. A man humming off-key in the kitchen while flipping pancakes. Tom kept my old business card on his desk now. The one with "Don't forget" written in my handwriting. Next to it, he placed a photo of us from our wedding day standing beneath the live oak. My dress catching the wind like it had its own quiet joy. Some mornings I'd sit on the porch with my tea, and just breathe. No panic. No what-ifs. Just gratitude. The insurance company still sent thick envelopes. I opened them now without fear. The numbers didn't shake me anymore. What mattered couldn't be priced in dollars, not my peace. Not my sense of belonging. Not the man beside me. Sometimes I thought about that night, the fire. The loss. The chaos. For so long, I believed it had ruined me. But it hadn't. It stripped everything away. Yes. But in doing so, it made space. Space for something new. Something better. I had thought the fire was the end of my story. But really, it was just the beginning. Written in smoke. Losing my house taught me that the things we think we need are often just the wrapping. What matters is the love that shows up when everything else is gone. The people who choose you. Not out of convenience, but out of care. I want to say this to anyone listening. Check your smoke alarms. Yes, but more than that, check your heart. Is it still open? Still soft? Still willing to let go of what's gone to make room for what could be? Because love doesn't expire with age. And asking for help that doesn't make you weak? It means you're brave enough to believe someone might say yes. For me, that yes came when I needed it most. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there is waiting for yours. 2. If this story touched something in you, share it. Tell someone. And remember, sometimes, the fire isn't the end. It's the match that lights your way home.